Please welcome Csaba, Fitzl, and Gergely Kálmán. They will share with us, Crash One, a StarBucks story. So thank you so much. Give it up, everybody.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to your annual macOS talk on B-Sides. Today we will talk about a story of a CVE which started in a Starbucks.
Hi, you might know me. I've been around. I did a bunch of independent bug hunting in the Apple Security Bounty. If you have questions about that, feel free to talk to me. We are doing the macOS training. I think Csaba will talk about it at the end. In case you're interested in that, I have a couple 0 days in macOS, and basically I'm focusing on file system and logic bugs.
My name is Csaba. I'm working at IRU. It's an MDM company doing macOS MDM and also EDR. I also do macOS vulnerability research, part of the job, and also before that, and I'm the co-author of the macOS vulnerability researcher training with Gergely. I also do a lot of hiking and trail running. So we have a very packed agenda, and we have a very short time, so let's kick in. StarBucks, although we use the name, they didn't sponsor the talk, although if they want, we are open to everything. So this is a bit old slide because it was actually 2 years ago in a country not so far away. Actually, it happened here in Hungary, specifically in Budapest, specifically in the Starbucks in the West End Mall. So we get together to talk about some research, some vulnerability, and essentially we talked about a vulnerability which both of us found, but both of us found it not exploitable. So we just left it behind. But again, we talked about it, and let's see what was that. So it was a potential bug in the osanalyticshelper daemon. This is a daemon on macOS which is running as root, and it's writing out crash log files to the system. If the crashes happened in a user-owned process, it writes it out to the user home library logs diagnostic reports. If the process was running as root, it writes it out to library logs diagnostic reports. Obviously, this daemon runs as root, and because of that, the problem was that we identified is that a highly privileged process is writing files to a directory which is controllable by the user, which is inside the user home. So there is some potential for abuse there. What happened? So during the crash log generation, what we could observe that the daemon opened the directory. It created a file there with the dot process name and the timestamp. Because the process is running as root, it was owned by root. So it changed ownership to the user, changed the mode, wrote the crash log into it, and at the end renamed it. Basically, it removed the dot prefix from the file name. But there was a few problems that made it not exploitable. One of the first problem, which wasn't really a problem because the process didn't error out, it checked if the directory is a symbolic link, where it tries to write a crash log. But even if it was, it didn't really care, so we were not sure why the check was there. Maybe it was an incorrect if statement, whatever. But it went on and it opened the crash log with the oxl ocreate flags, which meant if the file exists, it will not create it. Even if you have a symbolic link there or a hard link or anything, it will basically, okay, I cannot create a crash log, I'm leaving, I'm not doing anything. So this is a problem because typically with these types of bugs where we try to abuse file system operations, we want to plant a symbolic link or a hard link or something to redirect the file operation somewhere. Now with these flags, it kind of seemed impossible, although we could still use a symbolic link in the directory and redirect the file write, but it simply didn't happen. And one of the main limitations was the actual sandbox profile of this daemon, which said you cannot write anywhere else outside these two crash log directories, and that's it. So even if we try to redirect the 5-write operation of the crash log to somewhere else, it didn't work because the sandbox limited that operation. So we talked through, and eventually we looked through again the sandbox profile, and we eventually realized that we missed something in the profile. And it was these 2 lines, which meant if the process, we are still talking about the osanalyticshelper D, if the osanalyticshelper D has a sandbox extension, com-apple osanalytics sandbox read write on a given file, then it can read and write that file. So what are sandbox extensions on macOS? Basically, they are string tokens, like a C string tokens. They are signed, stamped by the system, and basically they allow the expansion of the sandbox of the given process. So let's say we have a process which is heavily sandbox. If we want, we can give it access to extra files beyond its default reach. So usually the way it looks like the proper use of sandbox extension is, let's say, I have a process which has access to a certain file. I create a token for it. I send this token to process B. Process B consumes the token. This is a crucial step. It has to happen. The process B has to consume the token. At that point, it will have access to that file, and it can do whatever it wants with that. So with the use of tokens, basically, we can give individual access to files or directories to certain processes. This is by design. This is how it's meant to be. And this was the case also here. And at the end, process B can release the token if they want. These are some internal APIs you can use to create and consume these tokens. So what we did, to avoid all sorts of races with like having access to single files, we just issue the token for the entire file system. So that, and send it to the process. But we still needed osanalyticshelper D to consume it. Like, okay, I can send the token to the process, but I need it to consume it. Otherwise, it's not effective. So luckily, the process actually had a function to consume a token. And as we reversed the process, we found that, okay, this OSA sandbox consume extension function will eventually call the real sandbox extension consume functions. But how can we reach this function? And eventually, as we reverse it, we found that it was part of like an XPC handler. XPC is an inter-process communication on macOS, very widely used. So basically, it meant that we send an XPC message to the process, probably the token, and in that case, it will consume the token, and it will give itself access to the entire file system. As we reverse the XPC function, we found that it's a massive function with lots of commands, lots of options. It was like a pain in the ass to reverse it. So what we did, we created a really small app, this one which will actually crash. And during the crash, we will inspect all the XPC messages coming to osanalyticshelper D to see what kind of message we need to send to it. This was the message. As you can see, this is like huge. And I was like, there is no way I will hand code this message. So I just copy pasted it, hand it over to AI. And in like 2 minutes, I had the C code to construct this message. So our plan was to, okay, we create a token because we are running outside of the sandbox. Our goal is to escalate privileges with this process because it's running as root. So I'm outside the sandbox. I can create a token for the entire file system. I send it to the process to consume it, and have osanalyticshelper D create a crash file. At that stage, we are not even in the RP phase. We just wanted to create a crash file by sending an XPC message. That failed. it didn't really work, and we started to see some backchannel errors coming from the process. So what were these backchannels? Again, we went back traversing the process, and we found out that it tries to do some sort of basically callbacks through a data writer endpoint. So what that really was, this backchannel, under normal operation, the purpose was to send back a file descriptor to the calling process. So the way it worked under normal operation, we have the report crash process invoking osanalyticshelper D to create a crash log. osanalyticshelper D creates a crash log, sends back the file descriptor to report crash. Report crash will populate it with more information and return with 1. It has to return with 1, otherwise osanalyticshelper D will just not continue everything. So we basically had to implement an XPC endpoint in our client to handle this callback communication and return with 1 so the operation could continue. So that worked. So what we could do at this point, we could create a token which was consumed by osanalyticshelper D. So we could basically open it up for the entire file system. We could actually create a crash log just by sending XPC messages, so without crashing any software. And if we created a symbolic link in that diagnostics reports directory, we could actually drop the file anywhere on the file system. So this is nice, but we are still far away from an LP.
Hello, hello. Right. So we're a little short on time, so I'm going to be double timing this. So if you remember this line, this is basically an incomplete representation of what is actually going on. What is actually going on is that this rename has two parameters, the SRC and the DST. This is the SRC one. The DST is exactly the same, but the dot crash, the dot is omitted. So basically, it's an in-place rename. It is effectively equivalent to this, which ABC/X getting renamed to ABC/Y. Now, this is great. You might have heard me talk about this, but this is a very classic race that almost nobody knows of. Everybody assumes this is secure because the kernel is clever, but the kernel cannot be clever, and it's way too long for me to get into why. But basically, you can copy directories into each other and then cause all sorts of deadlocks and nasty situations, and this is the way to prevent that. Now, whenever I see this, I abandon every other project, because at the end of the day, this is all nice and well done, and Csaba has done all the hard work of being able to trigger this condition. But in reality, what I do care about is the file being written and renamed into an insecure directory where I have control. Now, so as I talked to you, as I just told you, this is a race because the SRC and DST parameter is looked up separately. So basically, you can switch out the parent directory while this is going on. Inside the system call, you can switch it out. There are 4 conditions that can happen. There is only one condition in which this is going to work, when the file is getting picked up from the original location. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist in the destination location and getting copied to the destination location. Now, this is POSIX behavior. This is perfectly documented and perfectly fine, except it's a massive foot gun, and no developer I have talked to ever knows about this, right? So, awesome. Have fun with this information. So I found 0 days with this before. There are 2 prerequisites to this. Basically, I say 2. One is a nice to have really, but you have to be able to control one of the path components. That's a given, because otherwise this bug wouldn't do anything, because you would have 0 control. The nice to have part of this is that since the file is being written and then renamed to the destination location, you fully control everything about that file name except the name, because the name in part doesn't actually belong to the file. It belongs to the directory, the parent directory that contains it. That's not the reason why this is happening. It's just a quirk of this particular syscall, right? So I can have a file dropped in any directory I wish. I completely control the content, the metadata, the permissions, everything, but I do not control the name. So, however, the target does run as root. Otherwise, we wouldn't be, paying attention to this. So there are 2 ways to win these races, and I'm not going to talk about the clever one because, there's little point, because brute forcing is always usually easier and more feasible. In this particular case, brute forcing is possible because there are no side effects in case you lose the race, okay? That's one important aspect. The second important aspect is that the race is quick to run, or you have a bunch of time. If you don't care about timing, then you can sit there for weeks. Like an attacker, there are some scenarios where an attacker can plausibly do this. But it's true in our case. So basically, we swap the parent directory with a symlink in a loop. We trigger the race. The race becomes this, or this, depending on where you're looking at. It becomes an arbitrary file overwrite. This would overwrite files, but that's not what we go after here. And again, I said we don't control the name. We control everything else, yes? So very powerful primitive, but having no file name control really does suck. So what do you exploit with this? Well, usually we need a vector, and on Linux you would turn into scripts, you would turn into cron.d, you would, you know, all these classical, very, very old school stuff. On macOS you can do none of that, partly because it's macOS, partly because it's DCC protected, and partly because macOS virtually uses no scripts or whatever. But there are some system services, and sudo is one of them. And generally speaking, any star.d directory would work fine, because in these directories, the configuration files names are pretty much irrelevant. So file names effectively don't matter, so we get rid of the one problem that we had before. So we attack sudo. Now, sudo does require the file to be root-owned and the permissions to be restricted, but we could solve that any number of ways, with ACLs, with whatever else. Since we completely control the file that is being put there, it's not a big issue. So I ended up using ACLs, and ACLs are amazing because ACLs are virtually a backdoor. Again, we're really, really short on time. Ask me about this later, it's really funny. Basically, this gets me a situation where no racing is required, and this, once the ACL is on the file, it will travel and live with the file basically forever. So, in case you want to know about this, you can check out the man page. Although I can speedrun it for you, it's a revoked standard that got implemented anyway. It got implemented differently on Linux and macOS, so it's incompatible. So the virtual chance that you're going to get this code merged into upstream open source project is 0. Basically, it allows us to have this very, very nifty thing called an inheriting ACL. We take this ACL, we put it on an empty directory, root writes a file into this directory, the ACL inherits and stays on the file. The file moves, but the ACL moves with it. So from that point onward, I can control this file forever. That's one of the tricks. Also invisible to most programs, very backdoor-like, yada yada, it's a hidden API. It's all sorts of problems, whatever. Basically, there was another problem. The file was CH-owned later, and sudo doesn't like that. Sudo has to have the file root-owned for security purposes. And we needed to survive this, and basically we could have done ACLs or whatever else, but Csaba has found that we can just set this parameter in the dictionary that we're submitting to this XPC call, and it would just like not do it, and that's it. So I put it together. Csaba has done the hard work already. I just like came in my clown shoes and then wrote a Python script that triggers this a bunch of times and checks for success and whatever. Basically, that's all it does. The C program just triggers the XPC, and my Python wrapper around it just makes sure that everything's in the right place and whether the success condition has been hit, and we just keep hammering this because we're not very smart and we just want to brute force this. So yeah, basically that's it. So that's how this looks. We check for the version, it's the latest at the time. We're a regular user, we can sudo to root, and we start our magical Python script. Notice how this is going to take a little bit. In a couple minutes, basically, so it's not too bad. We could work on this, but this is a POC, and we're not actually weaponizing exploits. So, yeah. Ta-da! That's it. Fully reliable, logic bug, bunch of this going on macOS still. Have fun with that information. You want to talk about the escape part?
Yeah. So by the way, once we finished this exploit and we went all the hard work, we found out that, hey, we can actually control the file name through XPC. But yeah, we just went the hard way. So escaping the sandbox. So we did already have like root privilege escalation, but we wanted to do more because why not? So we wanted to use, because this service is accessible from the sandbox of the system processes, unfortunately only the system processes sandbox. We wanted to show that, hey, we can use this service to actually escape the sandbox. Now, one way to escape the sandbox is write out a file, like a disk image, DMG file, without the quarantine flag. On macOS, quarantine flags will control a lot of stuff like gatekeeper and code execution outside of the sandbox, etc. The point is that if we can write out a disk image without the quarantine flag, we can mount the disk image and we can run anything from that disk, including our own dummy app, which we run outside the sandbox. So that's the basic idea. Now, the idea was that, hey, we can use osanalyticshelper D to actually drop a file with a full control of file content, so we can write out a DMG file, and then we can mount a DMG and execute our application from that, and basically that's it. And that application will then later escalate to root using the same exploit. And there is a video of that. Because it's only applicable for system services, we actually created a screensaver for macOS, which will be loaded by the screensaver daemon on macOS, which is sandbox. And we kind of show that, okay, we drop a screensaver, no gatekeeper flag, no nothing. You run it, and you get root from a screensaver, which is sandboxed. Yes, the user has to install the screensaver, otherwise it's not loaded. And obviously you don't see anything in the, yeah, we mounted the disk image at this point, and it auto-runs our exploit, which is doing the same root privilege escalation we showed before. And we get a callback as root on a different system. So yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I can talk about the patch. Oh, you want to talk about the patch?
Okay.
That's fine. Right. We're in overtime anyway, so I'm going to be very quick. Apple actually patched this very correctly. Ta-da, that's it. They entitlement gated the entire XPC core, so they cut off the attack surface completely. And furthermore, Apple is not really, usually don't do this, but they actually fixed the rename vector completely, and they did it well as well. So kudos to Apple. This is the correct way to do this. And yeah, and that's it. We're having a training in Budapest sometimes in the fall. We're actively organizing it. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, please come join us. We'll try to work out something. And for you young guns out there, this was like, what, 30K worth of 0 days. So if you're interested in the Apple Security Bounty Program, this might be a good idea to start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Csaba and Gergely. You absolutely passed the challenge. Can you do your talk in half the time? That was amazing. So thank you so much for getting all the information. You guys, there is a coffee break for the next 10 minutes or so. So go ahead and get some water. If you have any questions for Csaba and Gergely, they are here. So go ahead and get your questions answered. This is an ideal time to go ahead and visit the lab. We have some really, really, really fun stuff. Challenges. You can win prizes. Yes, emphasis on the prizes. So go ahead and check that out. We'll see you in there.